Interlude. Part 3 of 4. Crimson had not been looking over equestrian history in favor of their medical knowledge, focusing more on pediatric and emergency care for her roles as future mother and medic respectively. But some of her extracurricular readings made her think of a different possibility. Maybe he was speaking in a metaphor. Immortality and agelessness are often mixed and synonymous with each other. And given that equestrian alicorns are considered immortals thanks to the sisters, he could have still been talking about you, but in a roundabout way. The explanation didn't make the silver mare feel any better. Do you think he was foreseeing something bad happening to us? Loki snorted dismissively at that. He probably saw you were becoming too much of a busybody. I think he was telling you to stop worrying and just go with the flow. Don't fret over eventually losing something. Live in the moment and enjoy what you've got while you've got it. Toon looked at her mates before resting her eyes on Violet, who was starting to fall forward off of Conrad's face. He took the giggling filly into a wing and placed her on her mother's back. Alexia turned around to gaze lovingly at her daughters. Yeah. I can do that. Just beyond the security line into the baggage claim milled a very familiar face to the silver pony. She barely remembered to secure her unicorn daughter into the back-mounted foal carriers she wore in lieu of saddlebags before galloping over to meet Hubert Smith. The man was standing around impatiently until he heard his name called and saw the silver mare bounding towards him. He recognized her instantly. Alex. How've you yump? He grunted as the pony bounced up on her forelegs at the last step and planted her chest into his stomach and tightly wrapped her forelegs around him. She was careful not to stab him with her horn as she buried the side of her head in his chest. You would not believe the craziness that's happened to me since the party. Smith hugged his old friend back, but was rendered mute by the presence of her wings and, more shockingly, the two foals strapped to her back so they wouldn't interfere with flight. Alex, long time no see. Are those yours? Toon dropped back down to all fours about the time the rest of the ponies arrived, and she angled her body to be perpendicular to Smith. Yup, going on 8 weeks today. She gestured with a wing first to the green, then brown, then finally pale yellow ponies. You've already met Loki and Conrad, and this is Crimson Anderson. He shook their offered hooves one by one before settling back on his old friend. I thought you were lying in pieces on some mad scientist's dissection table until I saw you on the news with President Fizz and find out I'm best friends with royalty. You gotta tell me where you've been. And he looked at the foals. How they happened. Director Thompson had given the herd an exhaustively thorough list of every classified piece of information she was not allowed to disclose to her human friend and family. Most of it dealt with operations conducted as members of Section 9 and the vast majority of information regarding the Mayans. All 4 adult ponies regaled their story on the way to Hubert's car and towards Alexia's parents' house. Hubert mulled over the information as lightly as possible, given that he had to focus on driving in traffic in unheard-of levels compared to Selina. When a few minutes had passed since Loki finished telling the tale, Hubert had an idea. Say, does Trinity have any nightlife yet? Conrad turned away from his driver's side backseat window. Aside from a few dive bars, not really. Not much of a point in strip bars either, since we typically don't wear clothes. Crimson and Alexia smacked him while Loki was filled with perverted ideas about a reinvention of that type of establishment. After pounding the snickering stallion, Toon directed a smirk at the expected question Smith was about to voice. As much as I enjoy Selina and whatnot, you think a nightclub could make a profit in Trinity yet? Loki filed away her new schemes in her harness to voice her opinion, as she loved the idea instantly. Oh hell yeah! Our town's only going to get bigger and we need a proper dance club among other things. If we're ever going to advance to a proper city one day. The green mare stared through the ceiling in thought. Smog, a never-sleeping city, light pollution galore, and graffiti-covered walls. She leaned against Crimson, who was both amused and annoyed by the off-kilter pony. Now that would be perfect for Trinity. Anderson rolled her eyes and spoke in a teasing fashion. I don't know. With all the hype around electric cars these days, by the time the town's big enough to have smog, most cars will be nearly emission-free. Loki's wistful expression was replaced by one of horror. You don't think that'll actually happen, do you? No city is complete without Smoog. Smith parked the car in the parking lot of a whitewashed condominium. It wasn't the most luxurious one in the city, but it held a level of class about it. Well, here we are. Home of Psychopath A and Megabitch 9000. Q. Toon growled while punching the man on the shoulder. Those are my parents you're insulting. He rubbed his shoulder as everyone piled out of the car. Yet I know exactly who I'm insulting. I can tell you right now they aren't going to be too happy with what has become of you. Loki and Conrad couldn't say anything about having a good upbringing save for the stallion's grandfather. So it was left to Crimson to make the necessary reply. If they loved you the same way you love Sky and Spark, then it won't matter to them what you are. That was when a very equine snort escaped the stallion, who grabbed the diaper bag out of the trunk. Believe me, my father was quite happy at what I became. Anderson didn't have an answer to being reduced to less than a slave and sold as property as Conrad's father did to him. She gave him a sad expression but otherwise kept her peace and let the herd alpha lead the way. Smith walked side by side with his old friend as the group made their way indoors. So did you call them to tell them you were coming at least? Alexia cringed in her response. Through text and emails that I was hit by the ponypox. I was scared to reveal my soprano voice to them. Why? I think you have a beautiful voice, he replied casually. She gave him a critical, if friendly, eye. Since when did you start complimenting me on my beauty? He returned the expression as he pressed the elevator button. The rest of the herd wanted to hear the response. Well, seeing as you speak, act, and dote on your kids as much as you do, I'd say your mind is quite firmly entrenched in being female, so I figured I would treat you like any other female friend. Alexia leaned her head against his leg for a moment. I knew there was a reason I ignored my parents' demands that I stop being your friend. Conrad didn't feel anything more than a twinge of jealousy at the attention Qbert was receiving. She was his alpha and had shown no interest in human men. Besides, it's not like a pony's love is restricted to just one person. He pulled the two earthmares in close with his wings to whisper off to the side. If things go south, will you two take the foals out of the room? I hope it doesn't come to that, but okay. You got it, samurai. The group went up to the 15th floor with only a little small talk about how Selina was doing and how the entertainment business was flagging because of recent elevations in public unease. It was Qbert's last comment before the doors opened that bothered the ponies most. I don't know about the coastal states, but in and around my area, people are starting to get scared to venture too far from town or home anymore. It's been killing my business. Toon couldn't think of a response thanks to an unsavory smell that emanated from the two lumps of fur on her back, who started to whimper at the feeling of it. I need to use the washroom, guys, I'll be back. Conrad held up a restraining hoof. No, let me do that. You need to get your parents used to the idea of having a daughter. You can drop the baby bomb later. That might be for the best. She undid the harness with her telekinesis and strapped it onto the stallion. Thanks. Just take it slow, he cautioned before a wily grin came over him. Unless you got your rapid adaptation from your parents. She playfully rubbed her daughters' noses with her own to get them to calm down a little before stepping away. Afraid not. He took the added weight with ease. I'm going to have to thank Gil for having the foresight to design the foal harness so it could be worn with normal saddlebags. Not to mention the wing slits. With the infants secured in place, he kissed his alpha, glancing at the steel-colored stripe proudly displayed in her bangs. Good luck in there. I'll be along shortly, so don't hold off the mother reveal for too long. Not that you'll give me a choice, she stated matter-of-factly. He nodded. Damn right. You're terrible at beating around the bush. Now get going. Conrad knew a slightly heavy hand was needed to get the mare to move forward. Right, right. She left him so he could return to the ground floor where the only public restroom was. The building was small, so each condo occupied half of each story with a small hallway separating the two. The two Earth mares were waiting patiently by the door with Qbert leaning against the wall closer to the elevator with a handheld game in his hands. Alexia walked up to him. "So are you coming in with us?" He didn't look away from his handheld game. "Not unless you ask me to. And I think it would be a mistake if you did. You know they can't stand the sight of me." "That's putting it a little harsh, isn't it? Surely they've calmed down after all these years." "I wouldn't bet on it. But in any event, I'll be here if you need me to go in and save the day." She gave him a friendly smirk. "You're all heart, Q." Steeling herself, the Silver Princess adjusted the necklace to be more comfortable and walked the 5 steps to the door to her parents' home. Crimson was doing a little dance. "Do you think we could hurry it up a bit? I've got to use the restroom." Loki remained silent, yet the same smile that rarely left her lips anymore was comforting to see. That was until she saw the Malkavian glint to it. "You're not planning anything, are you?" A short titter escaped the green mare. "Depends on what they do." Fearing the worst, but wanting as much time as possible before Conrad returned with the infants, Alexia hit the buzzer. "At least they're already expecting a pony to greet them." A gruff older man's voice responded after a few moments. "I thought the sign said we don't want no damned visitors." Toon looked at the door, and a sign in even less polite language than that sat at 5 feet above the floor. "It's me, James. I've come home." Alexia didn't like using that name, but it was her former identity. "James?" the voice queried with a warmer yet questioning tone. "Hold on." A louder buzzer and a mechanical click signaled the door was unlatched. A weathered feminine voice called through the intercom next. "Come on in, Gummy Bear." Toon closed her eyes as the expected snickering from her fellow mares threatened to spill into laughter. "Gummy Bear? Really?" Alexia didn't bother answering the green pony's taunting and stepped inside. The entry hall had a heady aged musk and was still decorated and furnished with modern styles. Alexia's only sister, Elizabeth, was residing in a boarding school, so the mare didn't expect to see her. What she did see, however, were 2 very familiar people who were happy, expectant, and confused by the 3 ponies that walked into the main living room. Alexia stepped forward to introduce herself for the first time since becoming a pony. "Mom, Dad," Toon tried to think of the right words, but they failed her as her emotions got the better of her. Mr. and Mrs. Toon didn't know the difference between mares and stallion, and the absence of Conrad made the couple think there was no noticeable difference. As a result, they quickly assumed the lithe and high-pitched ponies in front of them were male. Alexia's mother bent down and threw her arms open. "Come on, son, we still love you." The silver mare let the male form of address go for the moment and ran into her mother's arms. She wrapped her forelegs and wings around the woman who rubbed her daughter's back and mane. "I can't tell you how long I've wanted to see you after all this stuff happened to me." Mr. Toon was a little off-put by his assumed son's very emotional reaction, but chalked it up to not having spoken to them in nearly a year, compounded with the change in species. His wife was too caught up in the reunion to care. "It's mighty good to see you again, son," he said while bending down to pat Alexia on the back. "I'd prefer a miniature horse for a son over a corpse any day." Crimson and Loki shared apprehensive glances with each other, and Alexia was losing the moment in a bout of nervousness. She pulled herself free so she could look at both of her parents while speaking. What do you guys know about ponies?" Her mother remained in a crouch so she could be eye level with her changed offspring. "Well, like everyone else, we heard thousands of people were turned into ponies of all kinds of crazy colors." Her father nodded sagely. "And that it was forced on them by unknown causes, turning some into Pegasi and unicorns of all things." Toon didn't like what she was going to have to do. Did they say anything about the occasional forced gender change?" Her father's voice became a little hard. "If they did, I didn't hear it." The silver mare heard the light clip-clop of her mates closing in to lend silent support. "Well, the thing is, that's what happened to me. I got turned into a mare instead of a stallion, so I go by Alexia now." Her voice shrank as she expected him to reject her. The Alicorn's mother saw that look in her husband's eyes. Harold. It's not like she chose that. She turned to her daughter. You didn't choose it, right? Crimson was angered by the haughty and accusatory tone in her voice. No, she didn't. But what would it matter if she did? She's your daughter. Keep your pets on a leash, James, Harold growled, spitefully refusing to say his daughter's chosen name. I will not be addressed as such in my own home. Toon knew what was coming next, but couldn't stop Crimson in time. We are not her pets. We are her herd mates. Toon's mother stood up while giving both Crimson and Alexia a puzzled glance. What do you mean, herd mate? Anderson received a pleading face from Alexia to back down. The pale yellow mare obeyed, but it left the silver pony in a bind. She could lie about it and say the herd was simply their term for friends, or be true to her mates and speak the truth. For close to 20 seconds she looked between her mates and parents, searching for what course to take. As much as she wanted to reconnect with her parents, the Alicorn couldn't betray her mates by lying. They all deserve the truth. Mom, Dad. A herd is where 3 or more ponies enter a polyamory relationship. Crimson, Loki, and I are in a herd together along with a stallion named Conrad who isn't here right now. Her mother grew silent while Harold boiled with barely contained rage. You dare come into my house being guilty of destroying the sanctity of marriage? You are no son or daughter of mine. As far as I'm concerned, James died last year, and that's all there is to it. Now get out of my house. Alexia tried to keep tears from forming, but was failing miserably. But Dad, it's normal for us because we... Normal, he roared disdainfully. Normal as you still being a man. But no, I could look past you being a pony. I could have even accepted you marrying a stallion, or even you being a lesbian, seeing as you used to be a man. But you come in my house a polygamist. His rage was so loud and forceful that spittle flew from his mouth and splattered over his daughter. Leave. And do not return until you can restrain yourself to one life partner. Father, please, can't we just forget all that and be a family AG? Your father's right, James. Miss Toon interrupted harshly, following her husband's example of not using the Alicorn's proper name. You know polygamy is not just a moral depravity, but a grievous sin as well. We will allow you to come back once you have atoned for that. Alexia's lip trembled in mounting depression because she didn't believe what she was hearing. This can't be happening. It can't be. Her ears fell along with Loki's smile while Crimson's aggression was bolstered. The silver mare let the tears flow. So that's it then? You don't care that I'm alive? Only that I'm a polygamist even though my species has to be that way. In a flash of anger she stared at her parents with her eyes rimmed with azure light. 27 years and that's all it takes to throw me out. Margaret, Harold said coolly to his wife. See to it the barn animals leave, I have a teleconference I should be attending. Harold's complete dismissal sapped Alexia of all anger and replaced it tenfold with despair. Her mother adopted a holier-than-thou stance and tone. I suggest you leave before I call the police and press charges for trespassing. It was all Alexia could stand and she ran out of the condo with Crimson right after. Loki lingered just long enough to speak condescendingly to the aloof woman. Lady, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Wrong. Our biggest mistake was failing to raise him right. You could at least use proper pronouns. The green mare huffed. Guess there's no point in arguing with stupidity. And they wonder why I want to forget my folks. Loki departed while slamming the door. She saw Toon was in hysterics at the end of the windowed hallway and teleported through it so she could put some immediate distance between her and the condo. Hubert watched her go and put his game down as Crimson skidded to a halt next to him after seeing the Alicorn vacate the building. I warned you guys this would happen. Crimson yelled in exasperation and kicked the wall, leaving cracks in the plaster. She had to heavily restrain herself from doing more than that. How can anyone be so damned callous to their own child? I think a better question is how she survived them for 18 years. End of part 3.